This is the book of 1 Corinthians in 3 minutes. Let's go. Hey guys, Brian here. Welcome back to the channel. 1 Corinthians is a letter that's actually written by Paul the Apostle to a group of Christians in the Greek city of Corinth. 1 Corinthians is one of two letters in the New Testament written to that specific church. The Corinthian Christians sent a delegation of people to find Paul in order to ask him some questions and have him weigh in on some issues that they had going on. In 1 Corinthians, we see that Paul the Apostle spends considerable energy showing the believers in Corinth how the gospel is supposed to impact their actual conduct. We see Paul bringing gospel-centered correction to them in several areas. We see that the church in Corinth was divided. They were choosing to follow certain leaders and group themselves in certain cliques. Paul talks about the gospel breaking down that barrier. They had a very high value of worldly wisdom, yet Paul shows that the foolishness of God, as displayed in the cross, is actually smarter than the wisdom of the world. They had an abuse of spiritual gifts, and they actually elevated certain spiritual gifts as being more spiritual than others. Yet Paul shows them how love is the true source of spiritual gifts, and that the true goal of spiritual gifts are to build up the body. The church in Corinth also had sexuality issues. There was at least one person who was having a sexual relationship with his stepmother. There were also men who were having sexual relations with temple prostitutes, and Paul is speaking directly to that, showing how the gospel impacts their sexuality and their sexual relationships with one another. Paul also gives one of the earliest Christian creeds in 1 Corinthians chapter 15 as he talks about the reality of the resurrection. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul has the most powerful defense and argument for the resurrection in possibly the entire New Testament. When you come to 1 Corinthians, there are a handful of things for us to remember, but also to pull out of that as we read in the modern day. Number one, Christians are called to look more like Christ than they are their culture. The Corinthians had this backwards, and they often look more like their culture than they did their Christ. Number two, correction is biblical, healthy, and needed. Paul is correcting the misdeeds and the misunderstandings that this Corinthian church has here. And their relationship with Jesus is actually made better because they were able to receive the correction that Paul gives. And the third thing, your sin doesn't disqualify you. However, when someone brings correction to that sin, it's important to repent and change direction. These Corinthians wouldn't be considered Christians by many people in the modern day, yet Paul writes to them reminding them that they're saints by calling. He says that in chapter 1, and then he shows them through correction and instruction how to live out that calling as saints. And that's the book of 1 Corinthians in 3 minutes. Guys, thanks for swinging by the channel again. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. I would appreciate that. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, now would be a good time to do that. I'm Brian. As always, I appreciate you. We'll see you next time. Bye.